Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. We're going to have Jeremy Scahill joining us to break down where we are with those Gaza peace talks. A lot of developments over the weekend, so he will certainly bring us the latest. He's also going to update us on the treatment of those seized flotilla participants, including one drop site journalist. So we'll get the latest from him on that. Also, we've got updates overnight as a Trump judge smacks down Trump's attempt to send California National Guard to Portland, Oregon. A lot of moving parts there and a lot going on in Chicago. Portland in particular, will break that down for you as well. We're taking a look at the economy. Soybean farmers very upset over the tariffs, over China not buying any soybeans anymore, over the bailout of Argentina. One is speaking out in particular. We wanted to make sure to bring you that. We're going to update you on the ongoing government shutdown. In particular, we've got some polls about how Americans are processing what's going on, how they feel about the positions of the two parties and of the president. And we've got Van Jones having to apologize after a disgusting quote-unquote joke he made about dead Gaza babies to Bill Maher. So we will show you that and the fallout thereof.
Yes, that's right. Thank you to everybody who's been supporting the show. We appreciate it. BreakingPoints.com if you're able to sign up. We got our AMA Live today that we're doing for our premium subscribers. If you can't afford a subscription, no worries. Please just go ahead and hit subscribe on this YouTube video to the channel. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, just go ahead and send your favorite episode to a friend or rate us 5 stars. It really helps other people find the show. But as Krystal said, let's go ahead and start with the consequential news here of this Gaza potential ceasefire deal, which may or may not be coming together. Let's go and put this up here on the screen. So over the weekend, breaking news here, quote, based on the statement just issued by Hamas, this is from Donald Trump, I believe they are ready for a lasting peace. Israel must immediately stop the bombing of Gaza so that we can get the hostages out safely and quickly. Right now, it is far too dangerous to do that. We are already in discussions on details to be worked out. This is not about Gaza alone. This is about a long-sought peace in the Middle East. And all of this is amid some serious fights between Trump and Bibi behind the scenes. Not exactly sure what happened, but Trump seems to have had it, at least for now, with Bibi. All of that could change, and this could all be a ruse, but let's go ahead and put this up here on the screen. We are now back to Barack Ravid headlines about how the president is fed up with Bibi. This time, though, it's Trump, and he says, quote, exclusive Trump on the Gaza peace deal. I said, Bibi, this is your chance for victory. And in it, he said, quote, Bibi, this is your chance for victory. He was fine with it, Trump told me. He's got to be fine with it. He has no choice with me. You've got to be fine. And apparently also made some comment about how, why are you so negative all the time to Bibi?
Why are you so effing negative
Why are you so
time,
effing negative all the time? That's what he said there to Bibi. I mean, part of the context there, however, is that despite Trump's protestations, they are continuing to bomb Gaza. We have some video of that we can put here on the screen. Keep in mind, all of this is after what happened, the Trump quote-unquote ultimatum, or whatever you want to call it, where he said that Israel must immediately stop bombing Gaza. But you can see that this is going to be very difficult to finesse. There's already been some movement behind the scenes where I believe Bibi deleted a tweet where he had seemingly agreed or affirmed the peace deal. There's movement inside of the coalition. Remember, I mean, the Israeli cabinet explicitly does not want this. There are parts of the Israeli far-right coalition backing up Bibi Netanyahu. Bezalel Smotrich has already drawn a, quote, red line in the sand where he said, I will agree to no Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. They may be able to get around it because there's some alleged buffer zone here. Even people saying that Hamas agreed to the deal is not exactly correct, because they did not agree to the entire deal in principle. They said, we agree to parts of this deal. However, we're going to have to negotiate some finer points, of which there will be talks in Cairo starting today with some representatives of the United States, of Hamas, by the way, including one of the people Israel tried to blow up in Doha, Qatar.
Who was injured.
Yeah, who was injured in the bombing. Pretty insane if you think about it. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it could go in any different direction. This seems to be the closest we've gotten in a long time. That said, Israel tries to blow up the deal every single time. They have no incentive in their cabinet or their government. I'm pretty sure their people want this deal, especially to free the hostages, because that's what part of it is. Hamas, I mean, they've been, at least in the last few peace deals, have agreed in principle to a lot of the U.S. negotiate, but you can never count out the fact that this could all just be a ruse. Last time there was a ceasefire talk, they blew them up in Doha. Before that, I mean, they blew them up remember they blew them up in Iran. They've murdered half of the negotiators, and there's a big question too as to whether these Hamas negotiators have any credibility with the battlefield commanders who are left inside of Gaza, because all of the top echelon have all been killed consistently. So there's still so many things that could fall apart in this deal.
And it really does just all come down to Trump, right? Hamas crafted, and we'll get more from Jeremy on this, Hamas crafted their response to lead with the yes, right? And basically agree to things that they've agreed to effectively since post-October 7th. Yes, right. we'll give you back the hostages. Recall, on the table from the beginning has been an all-for-all deal. We'll give you back your hostages, you give us back our hostages. So they have long agreed to that. Of course, they accept the aid provisions. They do not want to be, Hamas does not want to be part of governance. That's easy for them to say yes to. All of this wild, like Tony Blair is going to run the Gaza Strip, and effectively you're never going to have any ability to effectuate your Palestinian liberation goals. All of that part, they're like, we'll talk about that part. They did not agree to that, but they intentionally crafted their response to lead with the pieces they could say yes to, in hopes that Trump would look at that and say, look, they said yes, we're getting peace, let's move forward, a sort of play to his ego. Now, that is what he has said publicly. He said, look, Hamas appears like they really want peace. Israel must stop bombing. But on the other hand, Israel has not stopped bombing. Some 70 at least Palestinians have been killed since Trump said, you must stop bombing. And there has been no insistence from Trump that Israel actually respect his wishes and the terms of this, nascent peace deal in these negotiations as they move forward. On the Israeli side, yeah, Netanyahu has gone out of his way to poison every negotiation we've seen so far. And what he's broadcasting to the Israeli domestic audience is basically like, don't worry, we're never going to have to withdraw from the Gaza Strip. We're going to keep it under control. We're going to get everything that we've ever wanted here. So as everybody heads to Cairo and these negotiating teams come together to see if there's something they can do here, there are a million questions to be answered about whether this is actually going to be able to achieve even a brief ceasefire. So that's where things stand. And the reason I say it really comes down to Trump is because he's the one ultimately who has to pull the pin on Israel and say, no, we're done. We're not supplying you. We're not helping you. You actually have to abide by these terms. He's the one also who has to ignore the voices in his own coalition like Lindsey Graham, who's out there saying, oh, look, Hamas said no to this deal. You can't work with them. We've got to go immediately back to the genocide. So lot of big questions this morning about how this is all going to, or if it's all going to come together. It's
very odd. I mean, front page of Haaretz right now is, quote, Trump shifts into high gear to end war. Netanyahu knows he can't stop him. I don't really know what that means. I mean, really what a lot of it is, the Netanyahu playbook is just to basically drag things out as long as possible. As you mentioned, we are meeting apparently in Cairo. Let's go and put that up there on the screen, please, from the Wall Street Journal. The ceasefire talks are set to start today in Egypt. And so delegations from the United States, from Israel, Hamas, and several other Middle Eastern countries are set to meet for Monday for the anticipated talks. But, quote, ending the nearly two-year-old war remains a distant goal. The parties are going to try to come to an agreement over crucial points, including Israeli military withdrawal lines in Gaza, the names of the high-profile Palestinian prisoners to be released in exchange for the remaining 48 hostages, including as many as 20 that Israel believes to be alive. Even if those talks succeed, they would not immediately end the two-year-old conflict. Trump said ahead of Monday that the first phase could, quote, be completed this week. I am asking everyone to move fast. However, the Secretary of State, whenever he was asked about this, said, quote, well, not yet. There's some work that remains to be done. And in fact, even the hostage part of the deal seems to be, one of the easier parts in some ways, because what they said is that the plan and the sticking points, which, to be fair, has got to be the biggest sticking point, is who gets to govern Gaza after all of this. The coalitional provisional authority of Gaza under the auspices of Donald J. Trump and Tony Blair. I mean, it's crazy. It's literally like a callback to the days of the viceroy and the British Empire in the region, or the United States quasi-colonial project of 2003 in Iraq, which obviously was a massive disaster. That is not something that people are all going to forget in the Middle East. Many of the Middle Eastern negotiators at the table probably had to deal at some point with the Bush administration, with the invasion of Iraq, the fallout, the terrorism, and all of that. So in a lot of ways, the ceasefire and the hostage deal itself seem to be one of the easier parts of this, and its potential. If you're Hamas, you're in such a sticky situation, and same with the Israelis, where the moment that all those hostages are gone, you have no leverage. And so, that's the only thing that the Israelis really care about in terms of their population. That's, even forcing some sort of negotiation on this. Because you have all this stuff on the horizon, and if the hostages are gone, considering the U.S. and Israeli track record of the last 8 months or so, could you really fully trust the guarantee of the United States government that the bombing would not, resume? I don't know. That's part of where I keep looking at this and I'm like, look, guys, they tried to kill you. They've literally murdered 90% of your top negotiators. Yeah. Every ceasefire has eventually resumed in conflict. To be clear, I'm rooting for a ceasefire. I think the people of Gaza need a break, and that's the only reason Hamas even feels enough pressure is that per Ryan and Jeremy, many of the people inside are like, I don't care what it takes, hands up. Just let me live. Yeah. Who can blame them? Yeah. Anybody on Twitter being like, oh, this is surrender? Fuck, honestly, screw you. You have no business telling people who have been through 2 years of bombing and all that how to conduct their affairs. The question for the actual negotiators themselves is, can you take that guarantee? That's why I was so upset about the Iran situation, because you could see, how are our talks going right now with Russia? Anyone want to tell me? They just bombed the shit out of Ukraine because they don't trust U.S. negotiators. Same here with Hamas. Part of the problem with that ruse is that you set the tone for all time in the future. You cannot trust these people, and they have all taken it at their word. All the serious adversaries, India, they didn't buckle. You have China, they haven't buckled on trade. Russia, same thing. If you're Hamas, obviously you're in a 10 times weaker population or situation, but you're still, you have powerful Middle Eastern people also at your back. I don't know. That's why it seems very difficult for me to see this thing come to a close soon.
Yeah, I think that is probably correct. Yeah. Although, you have to say on the other side, what other choice do they have?
Yeah, you're right.
You're always going to be dealing with the U.S. who are untrustworthy, Israel who are obviously untrustworthy, Netanyahu who just wants to continue, though, in his coalition who just want to continue the horror indefinitely. So, these are the parties you have to deal with. And one thing that Jeremy always talks about is, they really feel like, okay, it comes down to Trump. We need a guarantee from Trump that he's going to actually enforce the deal. There is zero track record of that ultimately happening. But the fact that he put himself as chair of this coalitional, provisional government was his attempt to be like, oh, I'm going to be the one overseeing it. Don't worry, you can trust me, and I'm going to see this thing through. But the fact that you have Israel continuing to bomb even after Trump told them not to, is one more indication out of I don't know how many at this point that you cannot rely on the U.S. And of course, we can all think back to the original ceasefire that Trump negotiated, which was supposed to move forward. This was a phased ceasefire agreement. Netanyahu said from the very beginning, no, we're not going to move forward to the other phases. We're just going to use this to regroup, and then we're going to go right back to the genocide. And that's exactly what he did. And Trump did not care about his own achievement in that ceasefire deal to actually enforce it and require the Israelis to abide by the terms of the deal. So, if you're Hamas, if you're the political leadership, certainly if you're the battlefield commanders, and, there may be, I think there are very different views from those two separate groups, and you're looking at this situation, there's no reason why you should expect that Israel is going to be required to actually abide by the terms of a deal that is also a terrible deal. It is not a good deal for the Palestinians in any respect, but it may also be the best that they can get. And there is such horror and desperation that, yes, of course, people are just exhausted and please just make it stop. My kids need to eat. I need to live. I don't want to be displaced anymore. I want to be able to live some sort of life. And if this is the best we can get, we got to do what we got to do.
Yeah, I think absolutely right. One of the key things that Jeremy who is going to, I think, expound on is the bitterness for a lot of the people potentially on the ground, because the deal does effectively say an end to all armed resistance. And if you think about it, how baked in that is to the identity and the political conception of Palestinian, not just statehood, but conception as a people. That's going to be very, very difficult to swallow. Now, it's potential that it may be the most popular thing right now for a lot of people, just because of the suffering that they've all had to endure. But who knows? A year, 2 years, 3 years, effectively from now. So I guess with all of that, we have Jeremy Scales standing by. Why don't we get to it? Joining us now, Jeremy Scales, co-founder of Dropsite News, great friend of the show. Good to see you, Jeremy. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
So, Jeremy, there's a lot of developments here. We talked last week about the potential Gaza peace deal. Let's go ahead and put your tweet up on the screen, which is the full response from Hamas leadership. Can you break some of this response down? It was sold in the Western press as a total agreement. That's not exactly the case, although it is very conciliatory. What are your thoughts here on the statement and what it means for the potential of a ceasefire?
I spent much of the last week talking to sources within the Hamas leadership and representatives of Palestinian Islamic Jihad and others who were involved with deliberating exactly how to respond to Donald Trump. And, the initial response from Palestinians in all of these factions was that Trump's Gaza plan would be a catastrophic deal for the Palestinians on both the short-term level and a long-term level. On the short-term level, while it did provide for the release of a large number of Palestinian captives in exchange for releasing all of the Israeli captives within a 72-hour period, it did not have robust guarantees that the war was actually going to end. Yes, Donald Trump said that within 72 hours, if they're released, there will be an immediate ceasefire, but it didn't have any details that previous agreements had. So the Palestinians looked at that, and then they looked at these sweeping other things about a foreign force being deployed, Donald Trump and Tony Blair essentially dictating the affairs of Gaza, major questions that cut to the heart of Palestinian self-determination or Palestinian statehood. And so these Palestinian negotiators had to figure out how to thread a needle. And they know that Donald Trump is campaigning for the Nobel Peace Prize. They know that Donald Trump responds well to people saying positive things about him. And so what they tried to do was to give the impression that they were embracing Trump's vision for an end to the war, and to affirm that they want to go into an agreement to release all Israeli captives in the context of achieving a ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli forces and aid coming back in. But they disagreed with large portions of Trump's plan. So what they ended up on is a document that actually, just on an independent strategic level, is quite brilliant, because what they do is they center what they know Trump most wanted, was to hear Hamas saying two things. We will release all of the Israeli captives, and we will relinquish power in Gaza. Now, we've talked on this show repeatedly about the fact that those are not new positions on the part of Hamas. They've tried to make an all-for-all deal. They've said that they would step down, but they led with that, and they thanked Trump for his efforts, along with Arab and Muslim nations, and they said that they're ready to make a deal. But the second part of what they did, and this is why I think a lot of Palestinians felt that that they threaded the needle well, is they didn't reject anything that Trump said, but they said Hamas is not Palestine. Hamas is one actor. We can negotiate issues related to the war because we're holding the captives and we're fighting the war. But if you want to talk about all these other issues, let's do it, but it has to be in the context of a broader Palestinian dialogue. So that's where things stand right now. There are indirect negotiations that are supposed to kick off this week in Egypt. The U.S. and Israel, though, said today that they're not going to start doing the negotiations until Hamas first meets with the Egyptians, the Qataris, and the Turks. And what I'm told is that the Americans and Israelis are basically pushing this idea that the Palestinians first need to agree to release all of those captives, and that it cannot be linked to a permanent Israeli withdrawal. That's going to be a major sticking point. We have to see, again, what Trump says, because at the end of the day, he's the decisive factor. He's the only one that can get Israel to back off of its maximalist agenda.
Guys, let's go ahead and put A6 up on the screen. This is Jeremy's analysis, and add some additional reporting here. And one of the things, the headline is Hamas's strategic gamble. You say, while President Trump enthusiastically welcomed Hamas's response to his Gaza plan, the White House and Israel deal in deception. And one of the things that you report on exclusively here is that those Arab countries, which were portrayed as being completely on board with this quote unquote deal, they actually, the version of the deal that they saw went through some Israeli revisions before it was actually announced. So can you break down some of how all of that went and how those Arab coalition partners are thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of an astonishing story, Krystal. So what happened is over the past several weeks leading up to Trump and Netanyahu taking the podium and announcing this 20-point plan, Trump and his administration had a series of meetings with Egypt, with Qatar, with Turkey, with Pakistan, with Indonesia, with Saudi Arabia, with the United Arab Emirates, and they were going over drafts of what was originally going to be a 21-point plan from Donald Trump. And just to give an example, one of the things that was in an original draft shown to Arab countries was that there was going to be no Israeli annexation of the West Bank. That was removed then from the plan that was distributed by the White House last Monday when Trump and Netanyahu took the podium. But what I understand is that in the 48 hours leading up to Trump and Netanyahu coming out, Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and Ron Dermer, Netanyahu's top political advisor and the Minister for Strategic Affairs, sat down and they started just plucking out various terms or changing the wording that the Arab and Muslim nations had signed off on. And then they also created a whole new map for Israeli withdrawal that would leave Israeli forces deep within Gaza even after all of the captives were released. Trump did not inform any of those Arab countries ahead of time that these changes had been made. And so foreign ministers of all of those countries, watched Trump and Netanyahu, and they said, wait a minute, this is not the text that we had been shown. But they didn't denounce Trump. They didn't say, oh, this was a lie. What they did is they sort of sat there and ate it, and they put out statements giving general statements of support for Trump's initiative. But privately, I'm told, Krystal, they told Hamas negotiators, this was not what we signed on for, but we can't do anything about it right now. So they encouraged Hamas, and I think more than encouraged, I think they were saying to them, this is really the last chance to make a deal. You cannot reject Trump's deal, no matter how disgusted you may be with some of the terms. And so I think what we see is Trump kind of saying he accepts the offer that Hamas didn't exactly make, and Hamas saying, we accept your offer that you didn't exactly make. And so now it really does boil down to it. There was this other thing that happened, which is that I think Netanyahu and Israel were stunned at how enthusiastic Trump was when he, the White, something crazy that happened. I don't know if you guys caught this, but Trump puts out his statement saying, great, Hamas has just given us a really good response. And then the White House posted a translation of Hamas's entire statement in full, including its characterization of what Israel is doing in Gaza as a genocide, referring to Israeli forces as occupation troops. So the White House posts this thing, and they said an important statement from Donald Trump. So they put that out, and then there's all these accusations. Well, oh, now Trump is Hamas, because of course the Israelis accuse everyone of being Hamas. The White House then, it was up for quite a while. They then deleted it. But what was happening is that the Israelis are spinning this, saying there were no surprises here. Everything has been fully coordinated. Axios, though, Barak Ravid reported that when Netanyahu did speak to Trump, he said to Trump, this is a terrible deal and it's meaningless, what Hamas has said. And then Trump says to him, why are you always so effing negative? That was the quote that was in Axios talking to Netanyahu. So I think what we have here is it's something a little bit more than these fake stories about, oh, there's trouble between Netanyahu and Trump. I think Trump, for his own reasons we've discussed on this show before, actually does want this done. He sees profit, motivations in Gaza. He wants development there, and he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. So, typically what happens is that the U.S. Has something resembling a kerfuffle between, whether it was Biden or Trump and Netanyahu, and then they get in line, and then the genocide resumes. This time, there are other dynamics at play, including Trump's relationship with these Arab countries. Yes, this could be an elaborate setup. It's certainly possible that they're going to try to trick Hamas into giving all of the Israeli captives and then resume the genocide. But that would cause an earthquake in Trump's relationships with these Arab countries. And I think Trump genuinely does want he and his cronies to make a lot of money off of what he believes will come next in Gaza. The wild card, though, is the Palestinians are saying, we're not going to give up our weapons. We're not going to agree to disarmament. That's not for Hamas to decide. That's for the Palestinian people. So that I think is going to be the real serious sticking point this week to look for, is the Israelis don't want any conditions given up to retrieve their 48 captives, 20 living, 28 deceased. And Hamas is saying, we're not going to link demilitarization of the Palestinian people to any of this. We need to negotiate an end to this war alone.
Yeah, and that is the sticking point where I just can't seem to see resolution. But you seem a lot more optimistic than me, Jeremy, because when I look at it, it's very possible a hostage deal, swap, some sort of temporary ceasefire seems totally within the realm of possibility. Can you talk about how you said Hamas wants a Trump guarantee? From my eyes, though, why would you want necessarily a Trump guarantee when we were about to meet with the Iranians and then we bombed them the next day? I mean, that just seems, sure, I mean, they have no position necessarily to negotiate, but they have all those other Middle Eastern countries around them. They have all of these disparate forces, some which are acting on them saying, hey, as you just said, you can't just surrender armed liberation or armed resistance as a cause. How does that dynamic come into play here past the hostages?
I mean, this has been true from the beginning, where the Palestinian negotiators understand that Trump doesn't keep his word, that he's an erratic guy. So they're not going into this blind. They understand what it is, but at the end of the day, they'll say, and I talked to them about this, what other choice do we have? We have to get as many countries as possible to encourage Trump to stay the course on this. We need Trump's guarantees, and they understand, and this is part of why they are not going to agree to any sort of disarmament, that at an instant, Trump could shift gears, and next thing you know, Netanyahu is massively bombing Gaza again. I am not optimistic. I'm just pointing out that there are some different dynamics at play because of Trump's unique posture as the president of the United States and the fact that his family has massive business investments in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. They have a lot to gain from getting Netanyahu to end this war. From the Palestinian perspective, though, the way that they approached this was to say there are only a handful of issues that Hamas has a mandate to negotiate. Anything else must be negotiated among all Palestinian factions. And I think that there's going to be a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering. The Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas is highly unpopular. Trump recently denied a visa to Mahmoud Abbas to come into the United States to speak at the United Nations. Palestinians don't trust the Palestinian Authority. European countries are trying to bolster it. So the question is, what Palestinians are going to be in charge of running Gaza, and are they actually going to be in charge, or is it going to be the former Prime Minister and unindicted war criminal Tony Blair that's presiding over this? This is going to be a huge boondoggle if somehow Trump is able to move forward with these so-called development plans. And a lot of his cronies are going to make a lot of money, and those Gulf states are going to make a lot of money. So I'm saying that in real political terms, it's not about the politics of this or the history of it. The motivation from Trump, I think, is to try to get the Nobel Prize and to try to set up a situation where a lot of Westerners and Arab Gulf states make a lot of money off of Gaza.
Attempted money grab. And Jeremy, what's your sense of, is there any schism between the political leadership of Hamas and the battlefield commanders on the ground in Gaza?
What's interesting is that part of what they had to do to deliver this response to Trump is to distribute drafts of this statement, and they did that among Palestinian factions, and then they had to get it to the commanders of the Qassam brigades and Soraya al-Quds, the four armed forces that are holding the Israeli captives, and the political leadership of Hamas on the ground. And my understanding was that it went very quickly, that there were minor discussions about language and questions that were asked, but that they came to an agreement very swiftly. The New York Times, BBC, other news outlets in recent days had reported, the ground commanders are going to reject this thing. They're hardliners. My sources, I think, would tell me if there were such divisions. And the speed with which they did this, Trump gave them an ultimatum on Friday saying they had until Sunday at 6 p.m. They delivered their response within hours of Trump making that 3-day window for them. So no, I think there was debate of a different nature within Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which was, do we reject this deal? Or do we try to thread the needle? That was the real debate, because a lot of Palestinians read this document and say, there's nothing good in here for us. And, a lot of suspicion it was a trap. The camp of people that prevailed were the ones that said, we have to try to think strategically, to go into it with an open mind, to make ourselves appear to be the flexible party and Netanyahu the obstructionist, and to appeal to Trump's ego and to embrace the idea that we recognize, and it's legitimate, he's the only one that can end this war. And that's what they did. I think they feel that they gave the best response they could have. And now their negotiators have arrived in Egypt. Khalil al-Hayya the political leader of Hamas. He made his first public appearance since Israel tried to assassinate him in Doha, Qatar on September 9th. He gave a brief interview to an Arab TV network. He didn't talk about the ceasefire process or the agreement. He talked about the fact that Israel assassinated his son in that bombing. And he said, we're not made of iron and stone. We grieve like everyone else. But I see their lives as worth no more than the lives of the other Palestinians who have died during this genocide. So that's the tone that Khalil al-Hayya is going into this with, having just lost his son, having his wife injured in the bombing, his daughter-in-law injured in the bombing, his grandchildren injured in the bombing. That's the guy who's leading the indirect negotiations now and is going to be sitting effectively in a room next to the Israeli negotiators who are going to do their best to try to make sure the Palestinians get nothing in return except their own prisoners freed from Israeli prisons, in return for all of their leverage, which is 48 Israeli captives, 20 living, 28 deceased.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.